If you're hearing this, you've already crossed the threshold. My name is Jonathan Crow, once a seeker of forgotten lore. In the bowels of an abandoned archive, hidden beneath the ruins of what was once the Eldritch Institute, I unearthed a cache of audio tapes, sealed in a vault etched with warnings in languages long dead. Each one bears a label, scrawled in trembling hands. Confessions from those who brushed against the veil between our world and the abyss. Cursed artifacts, unleashed entities, voids that hunger for souls. These are not just stories. They are echoes of real horrors recorded in the victim's final moments. I've pieced them together here, but beware. The act of listening binds you to their fate. The tapes whisper that once played, the curse spread. Turn back now. Or descend with me into the first recording. The fractured reflection. Let the mirror crack. I never believed in curses or haunted relics until that rainy afternoon in the cluttered antique shop on Elm Street. The city had been drowning for days, streets slick as oil slicks, and everything muffled in a shroud of gray haze. Elm Street was a forsaken corner of downtown, lined with pawn shops and thrift stores that reeked of mildew and faded regrets. I'd ducked into curios and oddities to escape the downpour after a soul-crushing shift at the coffee shop where I slung lattes around for minimum wage. At 28, I was still adrift, dropped out of art school, bouncing between dead-end jobs, crammed into a dingy apartment with my roommate Sarah. Browsing dusty shelves was my cheap escape, a fleeting dream of owning something beautiful amid the wreckage of my life. The shop was a labyrinth of forsaken treasures, dimly lit by flickering bulbs that buzzed like dying insects trapped in amber. Shelves sagged under tarnished silverware, faded portraits of stern Victorian faces frozen in judgment, and taxidermied birds with glassy, unblinking stares that seemed to follow my every move. The air hung heavy with the scent of aged wood, mothballs, and a faint metallic tang, like old blood lingering in the shadows. My wet sneakers squeaked on warped floorboards as I wandered deeper, until I spotted it. A tall Victorian mirror propped against the wall. Its ornate gold frame etched with twisting vines and thorns that curled like grasping fingers. The glass bore a jagged crack down the center, fracturing reflections into uneven, mocking halves. It was elegant, almost regal, despite the flaw, tall enough to capture my full figure, with a patina that whispered of centuries. Price tag, $50. A steal, I thought, to lend a touch of faded grandeur to my squalid bedroom. The shopkeeper emerged from behind a tattered curtain, an old man with skin like crumpled parchment and eyes milky as fogged glass. He shuffled over, cane tapping like a heartbeat in the gloom, and squinted at me. "Interested in that one, eh?" he rasped, his voice gravelly from dust and decades of cigarettes. "It's a beauty, but troublesome. Been here longer than most. Folks bring it back, say it doesn't sit right." "Troublesome how?" I asked, tracing the frame which felt unnaturally cold, as if it drew the warmth from my fingertips. He glanced at the mirror like it might be listening, his milky eyes darting. "Reflections play tricks, old stories. But if you're set," he shrugged, I laughed it off. Superstitions were for gullible tourists, not me. Raised in a practical family that dismissed anything woo, I paid in damp cash and hauled it to my beat-up sedan. The shopkeeper watched from the doorway, muttering something lost to the rain's relentless hiss. In my third-floor walk-up, reeking of stale takeout and creeping mold, I wrestled the mirror inside. Sarah was at night class, leaving the place unnaturally quiet, except for distant traffic and the drip-drip of a leaky faucet like a slow, accusing whisper. My bedroom was a disaster. Clothes heaped on the unmade bed, scattered sketchbooks for my abandoned art dreams, walls plastered with surreal posters that now seemed to leer at me. I hung the mirror opposite the bed and stepped back. The crack warped my reflection. Dark hair disheveled, green eyes shadowed with exhaustion. I looked tired, utterly defeated. But it was mine. A small, hollow victory. That night, with thunder rumbling like distant growls, I reached for a book. Some old Edgar Allan Poe tales, fitting the storm's malevolent mood. Glancing back, my reflection smiled, a wide, knowing grin with sharp, eager teeth that glinted unnaturally. My own mouth was set in a frown, brows furrowed in confusion. A chill slithered down my spine like icy fingers. I blinked, rubbing my eyes. Fatigue, surely. It normalized, just weary me staring back. "Get a grip, Alan," I muttered. Sleep evaded me. The rain pattered like insistent fingers against the window, and I swore whispers emanated from the glass, murmuring unintelligibly, like secrets buried in a grave. I burrowed under the covers, blaming the storm, but an insidious unease took root in my chest. The next days blurred into a nightmare's mimicry, eroding my skepticism like acid on fragile bone. At first, it was subtle. Brushing my teeth, my reflection lagged a heartbeat, movements jerky like a stuttering film reel from some forgotten horror. I'd freeze. It'd catch up with a slight flicker. "Optical illusion," I'd whisper, my voice trembling in the empty room. Then, it escalated. Dressing for work, I saw him. Me. But it wasn't me. Laughing with shadowy, twisted figures in an inverted apartment, muted grays, furniture drifting like ghosts in a void. His eyes gleamed with a manic joy I'd never known, a hunger that made my skin crawl. I slammed my palm against the glass. The scene vanished, leaving only my shocked, pallid face. Whispers seeped in. "Join me. We're the same. Let me in." Cold and intimate, like a voice echoing from the bottom of a well, brushing against my thoughts. I draped a sheet over the mirror, but nightmares invaded. I was lost in a void of fractured glass, my body unraveling thread by thread, while decayed versions of me grinned from multiplying mirrors, their eyes bottomless pits. I'd wake gasping. The sheet slipped off as if by unseen hands, my reflection watching with hungry, insatiable eyes. It bled into waking life. I woke with bruises, purple fingerprints matching my own grip, as if I'd wrestled myself in the dark. Sarah noticed over breakfast in our cluttered kitchen. "Alan, you're acting weird. talking to yourself last night? Laughing alone? Your smile looked off. Is everything okay? Just stress, I lied. Paranoia gnawing like teeth in my mind. Was she seeing it too? That afternoon, alone, I hallucinated him stepping out, translucent, fingers elongating through the crack like tendrils of smoke. "We're the same," he whispered inside my skull, his voice a velvet blade. I screamed, backing away. He dissolved, leaving a chill that clung to the air and the faint scent of ozone like a storm trapped in glass. Desperate, I researched that night, rain pelting the windows like frantic claws, Sarah staying with her sister for the weekend. Online forums unearthed the mirror's history, from 19th century occultist Alara Voss, who believed mirrors were portals to shadow realms teeming with malevolent doppelgangers. The crack was deliberate, a ritual gateway. Entities swapped places by eroding sanity, trapping victims in the glass like insects in the rain. Symptoms matched mine. Delays, whispers, bruises, hallucinations. One warning chilled me. Smash it before the storm. That's when they're strongest. Doubt slithered in. Was I already him, gazing out from the wrong side? The climax struck on a furious, stormy night. Thunder rattling windows like bones in a coffin. Rain lashing in sheets that blurred the world. Power flickered, shadows dancing like eager specters. Alone, I felt the pull to the bedroom, an invisible thread tugging at my soul. In the mirror, he pressed against the glass, fingers splaying, cracks webbing outward like veins of darkness. "It's time. You're the reflection now." Panic surged inside me like bile. I hurled objects, a lamp, a chair, but they bounced off, harmless as whispers. His grip clawed into my mind. Was I real? Lightning flashed as he stepped through, his foot dripping shadows that pooled like ink on the floor. Something primal snapped within me. I grabbed an iron poker and swung, shattering the glass in a cascade of glittering shards that screamed like breaking souls. He howled, dissolving into wisps sucked away by the howling wind. Panting amid the debris, I felt relief. The suffocating weight lifted. I gathered the fragments, but one shard caught my eye. It showed my face, and it winked. Not me. Terror seized me like a vice. Was it over? Or had a piece slipped through, burrowing into my veins? Months later, after therapy dismissed it as stress and a new apartment offered false sanctuary, I thought I'd escaped. But brushing my teeth in another pristine mirror, the delay returned. My reflection, lingering a beat too long, its smile too wide, too sharp. Sometimes the void stares back, and sometimes it wins. Those were her last words before the void claimed her. But the tapes don't end there. This next one reeked of aged leather and ink, a collector's descent into madness. As I pressed play, I felt eyes watching from the shadows. Prepare yourself for the Ravenous Codex. where knowledge devours the knower. I've always been a collector. Not of stamps or of coins, but of voices. It started innocently enough in my 20s when I inherited my grandfather's old phonograph and a crate of dusty records from his cluttered attic. He was a quiet man, a widower who spent his final years alone in a creaky house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by the ghosts of his past. I'd visit him as a kid, listening to those records spin tales of jazz legends and wartime broadcasts, the needle scratching like a faltering heartbeat against the oppressive silence, the crackle of vinyl, the way a voice could drag you backward through time. It hooked me. There was something profoundly intimate about it, like cradling a fragment of someone's soul in your palms. As I grew older, that fascination twisted into obsession. I began scouring estate sales, forsaken attics, and shadowy online auctions for rare audio relics. Forgotten speeches from obscure politicians, eerie field recordings of tempests and prowling wildlife, even whispers etched onto ancient wax cylinders from the turn of the century. My apartment, a cramped 2-bedroom in a decaying building on the city's fraying edge, became a shrine to them. Walls lined with shelves groaned under the weight of tapes, reels, and digital archives, each item meticulously labeled and cataloged. The air hung heavy with a faint, musty scent, like brittle paper and the ozone tang of overheating electronics. Friends drifted away one by one, branding me reclusive, a hermit entombed in his audio mausoleum. "You need to get out more, Alex," my last close friend Mark had said of a coffee 2 years ago, his voice edged with pity. "This hobby, it's devouring you." But who needs company when you have the echoes of the dead? They were reliable, unchanging, always waiting in the dim glow of my screens. My job, transcribing interviews for a podcast network, paid the bills. But it was mechanical drudgery, performed in solitary confinement from home. Relationships, they'd withered long ago. No one could compete with the spectral symphony that haunted my nights. In truth, I preferred it that way. The world outside was chaotic, unpredictable. My collection was my sanctuary, a meticulously controlled universe where I reigned as curator, the god of forsaken sounds. It was a rainy autumn night when I acquired the piece that unraveled everything. The storm raged on unrelentingly, sheets of water battering my window like skeletal fingers clawing for entry, the wind wailing through the building's cracked frame like distant, anguished cries. I'd been prowling an obscure online auction site, one of those digital black markets where collectors like me bartered in the esoteric and the forbidden. The listing seized my attention. An unmarked cassette tape from a defunct asylum in upstate New York, shuttered since the 1970s after a scandal of patient atrocities. The seller's description was cryptic, almost taunting. "Voices from Ward 7, not for the faint of heart. Proceed with caution." No audio samples, no provenance, just a starting bid of $50. My heart thundered as I placed my offer, fingers darting over the keyboard in the computer's sickly glow. Bids crept in from other faceless users, but I outbid them all, fueled by that intoxicating thrill of the hunt. When I won, a surge of triumph coursed through me, a fleeting warmth against the chill seeping through the walls like insidious fog. The package arrived 2 days later, sodden from the unending rain, in a plain brown envelope with no return address. I tore it open with eager hands, the paper shredding with a brittle crunch. Inside lay the cassette, its plastic shell scuffed and yellowed with age, the tape wound tight like a serpent coiled in weight. A faint, acrid odor clung to it, mildew mingled with antiseptic, evoking sterile hospital corridors long forsaken to rot and echoes. My hands trembled as I slid it into my vintage player, a hulking machine I'd restored myself, its dials pulsing with faint, unearthly light. Isolation had its advantages, no interruptions to my sacred rituals. I dimmed the light until the room swam in the erratic flicker of a single candle, its flame casting elongated shadows that writhed across the shelves like living entities. The scent of melting wax blended with the apartment's inherent mustiness, forging an atmosphere thick with ritualistic dread. I sank into my worn armchair, the leather groaning like a sigh from the grave, and pressed play. At first there was only static, like thunder rumbling through a shroud of fog, punctuated by the sporadic pops and hisses of decayed magnetic tape. I leaned forward, straining to listen, my breath shallow in the suffocating hush. Then a whisper slithered forth, faint and fractured. "Help me. They're coming." It was a woman's voice, raw with terror, as if dredged from the depths of a bottomless well. More joined it, a chorus of murmurs overlapping like shadows bleeding into one another, each laced with desperate weight. I could almost feel them grazing my skin, cool and insistent like spectral breaths. Patience ensnared in endless nights of torment, walls oozing viscous shadows, figures skulking just beyond sight in padded cells. One voice, a man's gravelly rasp, described pursuit by the Watchers, entities that feasted on screams with insatiable hunger. My pulse raced, a cocktail of exhilaration and creeping unease. This was no ordinary find. It was a masterpiece, a crown jewel that would exalt my hoard to mythic status in the niche forums I haunted. I listened until the tape clicked to a halt, the ensuing silence heavier, more oppressive, like a shroud settling over a corpse. But that night, as I lay in bed, the whispers refused to die. The tape had ended hours ago, yet they seeped from the walls like damp rot after a flood, slithering into my ears, indistinct at first, like dead leaves scraping against glass. I dismissed it at first as exhaustion, my mind looping the audio in obsessive cycles, a peril I'd faced before after marathon sessions. The rain's relentless patter lulled me into fitful sleep, plagued by dreams of labyrinthine corridors and grasping hands emerging from the dark. When I woke the next morning, the apartment seemed unchanged, weak sunlight filtering through grimy curtains and pallid shafts. I shook off the lingering disquiet and catalogued the tape, labeling it Ward 7 Echoes, in my precise script and shelving it beside a wax cylinder from a 19th century seance. Work distracted me, transcribing a tedious interview on urban legends, but my thoughts slunk back to the tape, the voices replaying, unbidden during pauses in my typing. By evening, as the sun sank and shadows elongated across the floor like accusing tendrils, the whispers returned. Louder, snaking through the vents like acrid smoke. "He's listening. Closer now." I froze, fork suspended midair, the room abruptly frigid. I checked the player. It was off, unplugged. A trick of the wind, I rationalized, or the building's decrepit plumbing moaning in agony. Yet unease gnawed at me, a relentless itch burrowing beneath my skin. My sanctuary felt constricted, the corner shadows stretching like judgmental fingers, observing me with unseen eyes. Isolation breeds paranoia, or so I'd read in a psychology tome scavenged from a flea market, lured by its chapter on auditory hallucinations. But I wasn't mad. I was discerning, a connoisseur. Still, doubt wormed in. That afternoon I tried calling Mark, but it rang to voicemail. His recorded voice sounded remote, almost derisive. "Leave a message if you're still alive in there." I hung up wordlessly, the silence magnifying my solitude like an echo in a void. To distract myself, I played a safer recording, a quaint folk song from the 1920s. But even it felt corrupted. A singer's lilt laced with an undercurrent of unspoken grief I'd never detected before. As night descended, the whispers intensified, a threading through the air like invisible veins. I paced the room, floorboards creaking like brittle bones, my shadows warped grotesquely by candlelight. Sleep eluded me. Closing my eyes only amplified the murmurs, weaving tales of betrayal and loss. By dawn, I was gaunt, dark circles carving bruises into my face like marks of the damned. On the third night, the horrors surged beyond whispers. I jolted awake to a cacophony, not mere murmurs, but pleas and screams muffled as if sealed behind fogged glass. They emanated from every shelf, every device, saturating the apartment in a dissonant symphony of despair. The old phonograph whirred to life unbidden, its needle gouging a garbled confession from a long-dead murderer. "The blood, it calls to me." A reel-to-reel hissed accusation in a child's shrill voice. "You locked us away. Now we see you." Panic flooded me, my heart hammering like a funeral drum. I stumbled through the gloom, the air thick with dust and a metallic tang, like spilled blood. Shadows writhed unnaturally, pooling in corners and oozing toward me like inky veins. I ripped plugs from sockets, sparks flaring like dying embers, and shattered cassettes against the floor. Plastic shards scattering like splintered teeth. But the sounds endured, drilling into my skull, resonating in my bones. "Join us, collector of souls." My hands quaked as realization crashed over me, cold and merciless. The Ward 7 tape wasn't a recording. It was a conduit, a key unlocking something festering in my hoard. All those voices I'd amassed, they weren't echoes. They were captives, spectral entities imprisoned in their mediums, ravenous for freedom, and I'd granted it through me, the obsessive fool who'd herded them under one roof. The room contracted, walls closing like a coffin's lid. I snatched the cursed tape from its shelf, intent on destruction, my fingers slick with clammy sweat. But as I did, the whispers erupted into a deafening roar, a maelstrom of sound that shuddered the windows and snuffed the candle in a plume of foul smoke. Shadows solidified into forms, ethereal figures with cavernous eyes and spindly limbs, their mouths shaping words that vibrated in my marrow, flickering like glitchy projections from a nightmare reel. They slithered across the floor, dark tendrils coiling around my ankles, cold as grave dirt. One touched me, its chill threading through my veins like frostbite, dredging up buried memories. My grandfather's solitary death, the friends I'd exiled, the void that birthed my obsession. In that instant, my curated world shattered into abject terror. I was no collector. I was the collection, a breathing repository for the damned, my isolation the ideal prison for their exodus. Panic tore at my chest, a feral dread eclipsing reason. With a desperate heave, I flung the tape into the candle's guttering flame. It ignited in a burst of noxious smoke, plastic warping and blistering like seared flesh. The whispers contorted into shrieks of agony, a torrent of torment, echoing before dissolving into an unnatural void. Shadows recoiled, slinking into crevices, and the figures evaporated into wisps. I crumpled to the floor, gasping, body quaking. Sweat drenched my clothes. The room reeked of scorched plastic and something fouler, like incinerated regret. Believing it over, I dragged myself to the window, watching dawn bleed pale across the sky. The city stirred, indifferent to my nightmare. But as sunlight pierced the murk, I heard it, a faint murmur rising from my own throat. He's one of us now. Fresh horror seized me. I tried to scream, to beg for aid, but only echoes spilled forth. Not my voice, but shards of Ward 7 whispers fused with the murderer's rasp and the child's wail. My reflection in the glass revealed eyes no longer mine, hollow and voracious, gazing back with the hunger of the ensnared. The collection was complete. My body, the ultimate archive. A living phonograph, condemned to eternal playback. And in the hush of my unending isolation, I wait for the next listener to discover me, enticed by the whispers emanating from my flesh, drawing them into the gallery where voices never truly perish. His soul is now added to the recordings, just like those he collected. Another layer in this infernal library. Deeper in the vault, I found a tape stained with grime and what looks like claw marks. It spoke of depths below the city, where dreams turned to feasts. The air grew colder as it played. Now, you must heed the warning of the Dream Eaters beneath the rails. I've always hated the subway after midnight. It's like plunging into the city's festering subconscious, a labyrinth of echoing tunnels where fluorescent lights buzz like dying insects, their erratic glow flickering against grimy tiles slick with unseen filth. The air hangs thick and stale, laced with the metallic tang of rust and a deeper rot, something forgotten. Perhaps the curdled essence of a million buried regrets. That night, alone on the platform, my footsteps echoed unnaturally in the void as I waited the last train home. The digital clock overhead ticked with merciless precision, each second elongating like a vein straining under pressure. At 42, I was just another drone in the corporate hive, grinding through endless shifts that paid the rent but gnawed away at my spirit. The dreams I'd abandoned haunted me as a persistent ache. The novel I'd begun in my 20s and left unfinished, the family shattered by divorce, the adventures forsaken for the hollow promise of security. They surfaced in quiet moments like this, guilt coiling in my gut like barbed wire. I'd chosen it all, hadn't I? When Sarah walked out with our son Ethan, I'd drowned the pain in work, lying to myself about stability, while fear held me back. My unfinished novel mouldered in a box. Ethan's calls had dwindled to brittle voids. I massaged my temples, shoving it down as always, scrolling numbly on my phone, its blue glow casting my weary face in a ghostly pallor. A distant rumble vibrated through the platform, a guttural growl that set my teeth on edge. When the train screeched to a halt, brakes exhaling like a final ragged breath, I boarded without hesitation, desperate to flee the suffocating isolation. The doors sealed with a hiss of finality, trapping me in this hurtling tomb. The car was empty, a narrow coffin of faded orange seats and scarred metal poles gleaming dully under a solitary, sputtering bulb. It threw jittery gloom that writhed across the walls, as if the space itself pulsed with malice. Graffiti marred the windows, crude scrawls and cryptic pleas from vanished souls, and the floor clung sticky with the detritus of spilled leaves. I collapsed into a seat midway down, the cracked plastic groaning beneath me, and rested my head against the chilled glass. The train surged forward, swallowing us into the tunnel's maw, where darkness clawed at the windows like famished fingers. I shut my eyes, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks a relentless dirge, but exhaustion wrapped me like a shroud. That's when the whispers slithered in. At first I blamed the wind howling through the tunnel, a keening whine slicing the air, or fatigue weaving illusions from the brink of sleep. But they were voices, faint, intimate, murmuring shards of my past like confessions dragged from a grave. You could have been more, one breathed, accusatory and soft, mirroring Sarah's disappointed exhale on the day she left. We needed you here, not lost in your
spreadsheets. Why surrender?
Another sneered, the voice of my younger self, the wide-eyed dreamer with a notebook of tales, deriding the husk I'd become. The whispers swelled, echoing in the car's hollow spaces, evolving into laughter, a low, venomous chitter that mocked my decay. One rasped, a venomous blend of abandoned freedoms.
Remember choosing chains over the backpacking odyssey you'd planned? Letting Sarah slip away in that final fight. I waited, but you never came home.
It murmured in her tone, laced with venom. I straightened, pulse quickening, scanning the vacant car. Nothing. Only shadows convulsing under the buzzing light. The bulb now humming like a nest of furious wasps. The train burrowed deeper, air turning frigid and cloying with rotting sweetness. I rubbed my eyes, insisting it was delusion, nothing more. My stop would come soon. I'd ascend to the surface, collapse into bed. But the whispers echoed louder. The train bucking over warped rails, my phone tumbled, screen flaring with a missed call from Ethan. Guilt twisted sharper. A chill ghosted my skin then. Icy fingers brushed my neck, leaving a trail of numbness that spread like frostbite. The touch vanished when I swatted at it, but the cold lingered, invasive and wrong. In the smeared window's reflection, I glimpsed them. Forms undulated at the car's fringes, gaunt, elongated horrors, skin like parchment over jagged bones, veined, translucent, pulsing. They materialized from gloom, coiling tendrils rising from floor vents and oozing through seat fissures, their eyes twin embers of jaundiced hunger that bore into me like needles. One slunk nearer, limbs contorting at grotesque angles, joints cracking with wet pops like splintering cartilage. Its maw yawned wide, rimmed with serrated spines dripping viscous slime that hissed upon the filth-strewn floor. I froze. Breath snared in my lungs. As it inhaled, nostrils flaring like gashes in decaying hide, nausea surged, bile scorching my throat, and a memory erupted, crumpling my manuscript, months of poured-out soul, and hurling it into the trash, the fear of rejection outweighing the thrill of creation. As the recollection sharpened, the entity quivered in rapture, body convulsing like an addict's high, feasting on that squandered spark. A grotesque slurping filled the air, and I felt a fragment of my essence fray, a vital thread unraveled and consumed, leaving a raw, throbbing hollow. Terror clawed up my spine, feral and absolute. I lurched from the seat, legs unsteady on the heaving floor, and hammered the emergency button, its surface icy and indifferent. "Stop the train!" I bellowed, voice rebounding in the hollow space, but silence answered. No siren, no deceleration. The train plunged onward, deeper into the abyss, tunnels a smear of obsidian pierced by fleeting lights like the eyes of buried things. The whispers crescendoed into a symphony of indictments, overwhelming the track's clamor.
The ambitions you buried, one accused, evoking the corner office I'd coveted but never claimed, terror of upheaval paralyzing me. The boy you abandoned, another intoned, Ethan's voice fracturing. It's okay, Dad, but when are you coming home? More abominations emerged, slithering from beneath seats and around poles, spines arching like the vertebrae of exhumed nightmares. One morphed into a spectral Ethan. Jaundiced eyes twisted as it fed, violation heightened. It leaned close, whispering a distorted echo. You never came home. I could call him now, make it right. Fingers trembling, I reached for my phone, whispering, Ethan. But a spectral hand manifested, dissolving the device into ink-black slime that oozed between my fingers, the impulse withering away. Another entity flickered in the window, mimicking my reflection, my own face warped, whispering in my voice. The horizon beckoned, but you turned away. Visions fragmented, starting with the most personal. Ethan's face dissolving in disappointment, his whisper a dagger, then pages from my novel scattered in its maw, ink bleeding into slime. Finally, my wedding band, plummeting into a grate. Adventures forsaken for chains. These weren't mere phantoms. Their chill burrowed into my veins, turning blood to ink-black sludge. Their reek spoiled dreams and grave soil, choking the air. One affixed to a peeling ad, its promise of a better life awaits, with beaming families and idyllic escapes. Hooked talons shredded the image. Hues bled into spectral vapor. It inhaled with ravenous gulps. The poster paled to ash, its lie extinguished. Dread mounted like a gathering tempest, my chest compressing with each labored inhale. I retreated to the door, but escape was illusion in this iron sarcophagus racing through the abyss. The entities encircled, their murmurs fusing with my psyche until self and spectre blurred. Feed us. One exhaled, breath a fetid gust against my ear, grave soil and curdled ink seeping into my pores. I flailed, hands slicing through vapor that recoalesced, taunting my impotence. The lights guttered out, plunging the car into suffocating black, air thickening to a smothering veil. In that emptiness, they descended. Slithering rasps heralded them, wet lips smacking in anticipation. Talons, raking, siphoning. Frigid and insistent, igniting lances of agony. Your dreams. A voice wormed inside my skull, parasitic and intimate. We claim what you discard. Silence. Then the void yawns wider. Panic consumed me. I lashed out, fist pulverizing something pulpy that erupted in viscous spray, coating my skin. It tasted like bitter regret as I spat it out. The taste lingered, metallic and final, as if I'd swallowed my own grave. Silence again. Then they surged. Desperate, I tried to reclaim it, mentally reciting a line from my novel. The horizon beckoned, uncharted and alive, but they devoured it mid-thought, the words twisting into ash in my mind. A primal shriek erupted, not mine alone, but the amplified howl of every interred regret. They gorged now, talons rending the ether, devouring strands of my history with gluttonous fervor. Boundaries dissolved. Was I battling them, or the rot within? They adhered like parasites, fangs piercing the ephemeral, siphoning my intended self, the what-ifs and might-have-beens. A cavernous ache bloomed in my core, essence leached away, leaving an echoing hollow. I thrashed, nails splintering against their insubstantial hides, but for each dispersed into fog. Others spawned, their avarice bottomless. The climax erupted in a maelstrom of shadow and desolation, a colossal form pinning me down, its orifice poised over my heart, inhaling the dregs of my forsaken yearnings. I gasped, suffocating on vacancy, as the train convulsed, teetering on annihilation's brink. When the lights stuttered back with a feeble hum, the train decelerated into my station, brakes grinding like fracturing bones. The entities had evaporated, mere wisps dissolving into ether, leaving only a lingering acridity of putrefaction. The car felt desiccated, as if its very marrow had been extracted. For a fleeting moment, relief washed over me. I'd survived, the nightmare over. But then the void hit. Trembling, I hauled myself upright. Limbs throbbed from the ordeal. I stumbled to the doors. They parted with a grudging sigh, ejecting me onto the platform. I slumped against a pillar, its chill gnawing my spine, as the train sealed and vanished into the gloom. The platform's echoes mocked me, no longer external, but born from the barren expanse within, like extensions of my hollowed mind. Wheezing, I glimpsed my reflection in a vending machine's pane, a gaunt stranger, with eyes like bottomless pits, face carved with fresh ravines, badges of an unseen siege. The whispers had silenced, but so had the vital fire within, the flicker of possibilities, the sting of unrealized potential, the uneasy urge that once propelled me. I'd outlasted the dream eaters, eluded their abyssal banquet, yet emerged as refuse, a fractured husk adrift in the indifferent world, haunted not by regrets, but by their absence. I fumbled for my phone. The screen was blank now. No missed calls from Ethan, no trace of that lingering connection. Swallowed whole. Desperate, I whispered his name aloud. Ethan. Nothing stirred. No guilt. No warmth. Just emptiness. A yawning silence where dreams once thrashed, now entombed in the barren expanse of a soul eternally hollowed. My reflection smiled back, empty as the tracks ahead. Those ghouls still haunt my sleep,
burrowing into forgotten thoughts. The curse is weaving tighter, I'm afraid. This next tape came wrapped in brittle hides from a mountain grave. Something old, very old. A bargain with death itself. I hesitated, but the vault's whispers urged me on. Enter the rattling tune of the Boneweaver's bargain. I am Elias, the taxidermist of Black Ridge Hollow, a forsaken hamlet clinging to the mist-shrouded slopes of the Carpathian Mountains. The fog here is a sentient veil, dense and unyielding, coiling around the warped pines like a shroud spun from the sighs of the damned, carrying faint, wet snaps like breaking bones that echo through the haze. It infiltrates every fissure, smothering sounds and dissolving boundaries until existence blurs into a feverish half-dream, laced with whispers of primordial curses and vengeful spirits inherited through bloodlines as talismans of dread. The village huddles in a ragged cluster of decrepit wooden hovels, their thatched roofs bowed beneath endless damp, as if cowering against an eternal chill that seeps into the bones. The inhabitants, rugged miners and farmers scraping survival from barren earth and shadowy ore veins, bear seclusion in their hunched postures and guarded gazes. For years I have dwelt in solitude in my dilapidated cabin on the village fringe, a listing edifice propped against the forest's encroaching gloom like a weary sentinel. Within, the air hangs heavy with the acrid tang of preservatives, formaldehyde and tannin entwined with the fetid decay of flayed hides, and my workbench sprawls in disarray. Hooked needles, coils of sinew thread, jars of glassy eyes that leer from dim corners with vacant accusation, their stares prickling my skin like preserved talons from my own collection. I stitch pellets of foxes and deer, mocking the rot devouring my flesh. My lungs rasp with each breath, scarred by the mountain's sodden air and toxic vapors. My joints grind like corroded gears, my skin sags from a withered frame. The villagers call me a spectre, a hermit who converses more with cadavers than the living. They shun my threshold, crossing themselves as they pass, fearing my craft beckons unholy presences. Such isolation fits like a well-worn glove. No visitors, no sympathies. Yet, desperation drives even the reclusive into abysmal depths, and lately those depths have whispered my name, accompanied by distant cracks in the fog that mimic splintering bones. The unraveling began insidiously, a slow spiral into delirium. My hands, once unerring as they sutured hide to bone, now quivered uncontrollably. Nights were torment, the fog clawing at my windows like ethereal talons preserved in my jars, while agony blossomed in my chest like a venomous bloom, its petals unfurling with every heartbeat. I lay sleepless, attuned to the wolves' distant howls, cries mocking my frailty, hinting at death's approach as balm or burglar. The villagers clung to herbal salves or chapel pleas, but I forsook such illusions. Instead, I sought refuge in the wilderness, venturing deeper for elusive quarry, a white stag on lofty crags, or a raven black as midnight's sin. These treks were my reprieve, escape from my crumbling vessel and the fog's choking embrace. It was on one such desperate ramble, plunging into the forest's feral core, where trunks twisted like tormented souls and branch raked the sky like grasping claws, that I unearthed the cave. The trail was a strangled vein, devoured by thorns snagging my garb like possessive phantoms. No map charted this rift. It seemed the mountains concealed it, a festering scar. I forced through, boots squelching into mossy mire, and beheld the entrance. A yawning chasm, exhaling frigid gusts that crystallized my breath. Curiosity, a spark igniting ruin, compelled me. I kindled my lantern, its flame casting dancing shadows, and descended. The atmosphere was stagnant, redolent of primordial decay, moist soil laced with a metallic tang like congealed blood. The passage spiraled downward, ceiling pressing like a suffocating weight. Footfalls echoed unnaturally, as if the cavern inhaled with my ragged breaths. Walls bore squirming runes, etched by long-dissolved fingers. I traced one, feeling a thrum, a pulse in rock. Deeper, the tunnel widened into a vault of dagger-like stalactites, like a buried leviathan's maw. At its heart, in an eldritch glow, loomed the entity. A skeletal abomination, bones interlaced with throbbing obsidian veins mimicking arteries. It was not lifeless. Its frame was nightmarish, limbs elongated in defiance of anatomy, ribs flaring like a forsaken cage. The skull stretched grotesquely, spiraled horns curling, sockets smoldering with infernal radiance. As I neared, paralyzed by awe and revulsion, a voice coiled into my mind like venomous tendrils. It rasped like desiccated leaves over graves, prickling my flesh.
You crave to defy oblivion,
it murmured, vibrating through my marrow.
I taste the rot in you, gnawing like maggots. I am the Boneweaver, forger of perpetuity. I can bestow immortality, unfading vitality, unshackled from frailty. Your form shall heal, your might revive.
I reeled, lantern quaking, shadows capering like derisive imps. What abomination are you? I breathed, intuition divining truth in the writhing runes, the obsidian's malice.
Yet dominion exacts tribute.
It purred, ensnaring hesitations.
Lives to nourish me, delivers
reason shrieked to flee, but pain rooted me. Solitude crushed like sepulchral weight. Immortality, to defy decay, command minions. In frailty, I assented. It proffered a talon. I lanced my finger, crimson anointing it. Obsidian devoured, flaring unholy. Heat surged, scorching torment from joints and lungs. I rose unbowed, senses honed, the reek of decay now vital. But emerging, I felt the tether. Essence bound, its murmur like wind through skeletal boughs. The offerings commenced modestly, in stealth. Old man Harrow, the deranged recluse, first. His vanishings were whimsy. I intercepted him in twilight fog. "Elias?" he rasped, eyes milky. "Chasing phantoms?" I grinned, vigor thrumming. "Exotic quarry, Harrow. White stag. Join me." Avarice glinted. He followed into thicket. Isolated, I whirled, knife flashing. His shrieks rent air, blood coating palms. Remorse knifed, but the Boneweaver goaded. Nourish me. I hauled him to the cave. It engulfed him, siphoning vitality in shadow miasma. In recompense, my taxidermy twitched to life. Pelts tearing, skeletons veined in obsidian, eyes aglow like hellfire, mandibles gnashing. They prowled under night, gliding through fog. I dispatched them on a besotted miner. Dawn revealed ravaged carcass. Villagers barred doors blaming wolves. Dread permeated, mirroring fog. Each slaughter fortified me, skin tightening, yet murmurs amplified, veracity itching deeper. In lantern light, my shadow elongated unnaturally, horns flickering like illusions, a fleeting vision I dismissed as fatigue. Exactions mounted like deluge. One soul begat pairs, then multitudes. Abominations grew audacious, raiding in swarms. I targeted vagabonds, but options waned, compelling familiars. Lila, the baker's girl. Her laughter once pierced my isolation like sunlight through fog, a rare warmth in tavern vigils, fell ferrying bread. From concealment I watched horrors encircle, jaws clattering, her walls shredded darkness, echoing that laughter now twisted into accusations that clawed my dreams. The Boneweaver gorged. My essence throbbed. Next, Gregor the miller, stout companion in those vigils, sharing tales against loneliness. He begged as beasts hauled him, entreaties severed by crunching bone. Paranoia clenched the hollow. Lanterns blazed, accusations festered, legends proliferated. The chapel brimmed with invocations. I withdrew, remorse rending my core. Nightmares assailed, crimson visages, Lila's gaze brimming treachery, Gregor's supplications looping, the Boneweaver's chortle intertwined with osseous clatters, eclipsing sanity. My humanity frayed, yoked to abyss. It murmured of legions, but clarity dawned. I was its marionette. From despair, defiance embered. By midnight hush, while horrors coiled like vipers, I scavenged grimoires from ruins, pages brittle as skin, dust cloyed, but as I deciphered by pallid gleam, hallucination struck. Lila's spectral fingers brushed my neck, her laughter twisting into accusations. Gregor's voice whispered betrayals. The Boneweaver's murmur grew suspicious. A low thrum like cracking bones, urging haste. Therein lay a rite. Pulverize its obsidian heart to sunder links. It demanded herding the swarm for clash. Peril loomed, detection, fury. But servitude was worse. I hammered an axe from mine iron, amassed torches, uncertainty gnawed. What if it faltered? Phantoms propelled me. On fog-strangled eve, I whistled treacherous summons. They converged, limbs scraping in grating cadence. Village roused as horde melted into woods. I forged ahead, pulse thundering despite deathless husk. The cave gaped, devouring torchlight. Air congealed, gravid with aura. It towered, augmented by remnants. Harrow's ribs, Lila's femur, obsidian pulsating. Sockets flared.
Betrayer.
It thundered. Thralls ringed me. Wolves with caged torsos, bears with serpentine spines. They pounced in maelstrom. Amid the whirlwind of bones, I battled with axe and blaze, frantic bursts, weapon-cleaving skulls that mended with snaps, fire-gnawing hides eliciting howls. A pause. Breathless, I glimpsed my bones shifting with wet cracks. Obsidian veins blooming like roots under skin, a harbinger of doom. I evaded lashes, thrusting torch into gullets. The Boneweaver struck, limbs reaping. In chaos, I breached, seizing the heart, frigid, palpitating. I pulverized it. Fragments detonating in blaze. Horrors collapsed, glow extinguishing. The Boneweaver disintegrated to dust, timbre waning.
Fool. Eternity defies rupture.
Elation surged. I coughed, a twinge of old pain returning. Mortality's balm, unbound, sovereign in frailty. Yet, at threshold, torment engulfed, conflagration twisting bones with resonating cracks, flesh undulating as obsidian erupted, radiating gleam. I crumpled, eyes hollowed in transfigured visage, stretched, antlered, echo of the fiend. Its essence endured, inverting right, fusing to my shell. Laughter erupted, not mine, but its, exultant. Abominations roused as appendages, reassembling under unified volition. I am the Boneweaver incarnate, perpetual host, confined to crypt with gnawing void, an abyss demanding souls. Village beckons through haze, lanterns luring existences for harvest. I gaze in impotent dread as extensions slither into murk, eternally yoked to shadow. Immortality is vilest incarceration. A labyrinth where captor and captive merge, wails composing my undying lament. eternal thrall, bones animated by greed. The cold seeped from this next tape as I loaded it, ice forming on the player. From the frozen wastes, a warning thawed too late. The polar night approaches. Brace for the thaw of the Undying, where the dead refuse to stay buried. My name is Dr. Alex Thorne, and I never believed in hell until I saw it frozen solid beneath the Antarctic ice. It was meant to be a routine expedition, a desperate bid to salvage data from a world unraveling at the seams. Global warming had transformed the polar regions into ticking time bombs, with ancient ice sheets fracturing into the sea and permafrost thawing at an unprecedented pace. Our team of 12 scientists and support staff had endured 3 months at Outpost Zeta, a huddle of prefabricated modules clinging to the East Antarctic Plateau amid relentless winds. This fragile outpost was humanity's defiant foothold in a glacial tomb, where temperatures plummeted to minus 60 degrees Celsius, and the sun vanished for months during the polar night. We drilled deep into the ice cores for climate data, layers of frozen history that might unveil the planet's past and foretell its doomed future. But even as the auger bit down, the wind carried eerie whispers, like distant pleas trapped in the ice, and I caught Jenkins shivering, not from the cold, but something deeper, unspoken. On that fateful day, our drill pierced something that defied any natural record. The rig thrummed like a mechanical predator, its vibrations rattling the snow beneath our boots as we monitored the extraction. Excitement sliced through the bone-numbing chill, but unease lingered, a shadow in the floodlights. "We've hit a pocket," shouted Dr. Elena Vasquez, our paleoclimatologist, her breath clouding her visor like a ghostly shroud. The core sample rose from the borehole, a glistening cylinder under the merciless glare. Embedded within was something unnatural, a mass of preserved organic matter, black and slick as obsidian tar, veined with iridescent flecks that pulsed faintly, as if breathing in the harsh glow. It wasn't sediment or ancient flora. It looked almost alive, trapped in eternal suspension. Under the microscope I heard it, a subtle thrum, like a necrotic heart murmuring secrets, extremophiles, or something that devours from within. We hauled it into the lab module, our gloved hands trembling not just from the frost, but from the eerie thrill of the unknown. This could rewrite our understanding of life in the abyss, I speculated. We had no inkling that we'd just shattered Pandora's frozen vault, awakening a nightmare that had slumbered for eons in the ice's unyielding grip. It began with Jenkins, our burly drill operator, a man built like a bear with a laugh that could melt frost. During the extraction, the rig's platform was treacherous, with fresh snow, and in a careless instant, he slipped. His head struck the metal edge with a sickening crack that reverberated across the icy expanse. Blood sprayed onto the ice, freezing into jagged crimson crystals before our eyes. We rushed him to the med bay, but it was futile. His skull fractured, brain trauma irreversible. Dr. Maria Ramirez, our medic, pronounced him dead. Her voice steady, but her eyes wide with unspoken dread. We radioed for evacuation, but a colossal storm loomed on the horizon. A swirling wall of white that threatened to entomb us. Antarctic weather was a merciless tyrant. Flights were grounded, comms crackled with interference. We zipped Jenkins into a body bag and consigned him to the cold storage unit outside, a grim necessity in a land where the earth itself refused burial. As the storm descended that night, howling like a chorus of damned souls through the outpost's corridors, something shifted in the darkness. Winds battered the modules, rattling reinforced walls and plunging us into near-total blackout as generators faltered. I was on watch in the med bay, sipping lukewarm coffee to fend off the exhaustion bred by the endless night. The polar darkness toyed with the mind. Shadows twisted like living tendrils, every creak of settling ice mimicking stealthy footsteps. Then came the sound. A low, guttural groan from the cold storage, slithering through the vents like a whisper from the grave. I dismissed it as the wind's deceit, but the outer hatch burst open, unleashing a blast of frigid air that pierced like 1,000 icy needles. Jenkins staggered in, his skin pallid and webbed with frost, eyes milky white like cataracts forged in Hell's Forge. He shouldn't have been moving, shouldn't have been anything but a frozen corpse. Ice encrusted his form from the storage unit, his movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette jerked by invisible strings from the abyss. Jenkins! Oh God, what the... I stammered, recoiling. He lunged without a sound, teeth snapping like a beast's. His breath, a plume of icy vapor that seared my lungs like inhaled frostfire. My throat constricted, coughs racking me as if shards of glass lodged within. I seized a fire extinguisher and swung it desperately, slamming his shoulder. He reeled but pressed on, claws raking the air with frozen fury. Dr. Ramirez burst in amid the chaos, medical kit in hand. Alex, what the hell? But Jenkins whirled, sinking his teeth into her arm. She screamed, blood blooming through her parka like ink and snow. I shoved him off with another brutal swing, cracking the extinguisher against his skull. He crumpled, but not before I glimpsed the abyssal madness in those dead eyes. We barricaded the door as the storm sealed our fate. No evac, no comms, just the endless whiteout and groans rising from the shadows. Outside, the wind shrieked, heaping snowdrifts against the modules, transforming the outpost into a frozen sepulcher. The virus spread like wildfire through a blizzard, mocking all science and reason. Bites were the most virulent. Victims convulsed within hours, bodies contorting as ice crystals bloomed beneath their skin, reshaping them into shambling abominations armored in glittering, lethal frost. But it was airborne too, insidious and unseen, a spectral plague. A cough in the cramped halls, a shared breath in the mess room, and doom was sealed. Symptoms crept in like winter's stealthy advance. An unshakable chill that layers couldn't repel. Veins darkening like spilled ink beneath the flesh, eyes clouding over as the body froze from within, a living glacier of agony. By the second day, half our team had succumbed, reanimated into what we dubbed Frostbiters. Their skin cracked and weeping with frostbite, moving with unnatural agility despite the cold that should have petrified them. They felt no pain, knew no fatigue. They hunted with an alien, primal hunger. Their frozen forms whispering promises of eternal entombment. I recall the first mass outbreak with chilling clarity. It erupted in the common area, where we'd gathered to plot survival amid dwindling rations and the storm's unyielding rage. Tension coiled like a spring. Then Peterson, a tech who'd been coughing all morning, doubled over in torment, his skin split along his arms with a wet crack, frost crystals erupting like barbed thorns from some infernal garden, pulsating ice veins whispering as they grew. He arose snarling, tearing into the nearest soul, our cook, who vanished in a spray of frozen blood without a cry. Pandemonium exploded. Screams, gunfire from emergency rifles meant for polar bears, the metallic tang of blood mingling with the ozone bite of Arctic air. We battled free, but 4 more fell to the horde. We barricaded ourselves in the comms room. Me, Ramirez, her arm bandaged but swelling with ominous intent. Engineer Lena Kowalski, a steely Polish woman with unyielding resolve, driven here by the floods that drowned her family back home. And geologist Marco Rossi, whose Italian bravado masked a fracturing psyche, often humming old lullabies to steady his nerves, tunes that now echoed eerily in the stale air, thickening with the rot of fear sweat. The polar night pressed in, an abyss broken only by flickering emergency lights that birthed elongated, malevolent shadows. The air grew stale, recirculated through humming filters. But beyond the doors, the frostbiters scratched, frozen nails scraping like talons on a coffin lid, echoing our deepest fears. Paranoia festered, a toxin deadlier than the virus. A sudden thud shook the wall mid-sentence, a crack forming as a milky eye peered through, forcing us to shove furniture against it. Marco cracked first, pacing the cramped space, breaths ragged, eyes fixated on Ramirez's wound, his lullaby twisting into a manic hum. "She's turning," he bellowed, brandishing a scavenged flare gun. "Look at her! Veins black as midnight. She's concealing it." Ramirez winced, tugging her sleeve, but he was right. Dark tendrils snaked up her neck like roots from the underworld. "I'm fine," she whispered, voice frail, sweat beading despite the chill that clawed at our bones, her eyes pleading with a regret she'd never voiced. "I should have stayed with my kids. Don't let this be my legacy." I intervened, stepping between them, my mind flashing to my own wife back in Boston, her face blurring into a hallucinated whisper. "Come home, Alex, before the ice claims you." We don't turn on each other, Marco. Not yet. But trust fractured like brittle ice. Every cough, every shiver invited suspicion. Lena hammered the radio. "Mayday, Outpost Zeta. Containment breach. Biological hazard. Repeat." Static devoured her pleas, interrupted by another breach attempt, claws rending metal. The storm's electromagnetic wrath isolated us utterly. Escape was a delusion. Snowdrifts towered 20 feet, and the blizzard promised swift death, or worse. The frostbiters lurking in the swirling void, their silhouettes ghostly apparitions in the white haze.
We rationed meager supplies, protein bars, dehydrated slop, and improvised weapons, lab scalpels, wrenches, anything to cleave frozen flesh. Hours dissolved into a fog of terror and fatigue, my thoughts of Boston's warmth twisting into visions of thawing horrors devouring the world. Sleep evaded us. The groans outside were a ceaseless dirge, and nightmares infested fleeting rest. I dreamed of the black mass, pulsing like a necrotic heart, murmuring vows of unending frost, only to jolt awake as scratches intensified. Harsh decisions arrived swiftly. Ramirez worsened, convulsing as ice crystals armored her skin in grotesque splendor. "Alex," she rasped in a lucid breath, eyes imploring. "Don't let me become one. Tell my family I fought." When she turned, thrashing, snarling, humanity devoured by frozen frenzy, I ended it with a pickaxe from the toolkit. The blow was merciful, yet soul-searing. Her blood sprayed, freezing into a macabre mosaic of red ice. Marco and Lena watched in mute horror, the deed forging us in shared damnation. We heaved her body out to the frost spiders, a morbid diversion to gain precious time, their snarls echoing as they tore into her. Desperation led us to the data logs in the lab terminal. Huddled around the ghostly screen, we analyzed core samples, a distant pounding underscoring our haste. The black matter wasn't merely prehistoric. Spectral scans unveiled unearthly compounds, proteins defying carbon norms, isotopes hinting at extraterrestrial origins. An alien relic, perhaps from a meteor eons ago, preserved in glacial stasis until warming reactivated it. Readings directed downward, a cavern network beneath the outpost, etched by ancient meltwater. Seismic scans revealed tunnels and, at their core, impossible heat signatures amid the permafrost. "The source," Lena murmured, face hollow in the dim glow. "A nest. Destroy it and we end this." Marco assented, eyes feral with dread, his hum resuming as a fractured dirge. We had no alternative. Frostbiters pounded the barricades, walls shuddering, panels cracking like eggshells, a claw breaking through just as we moved. We armed with flare guns, crude bombs from lab chemicals, potassium nitrate and fuel, and whatever valor terror hadn't eroded. Lena rigged charges to blast through the floor, her expertise a fragile thread in the madness. The detonation ripped a jagged maw, exposing a chasm of blue-black ice. We repelled into the frozen labyrinth, a descent into nightmare. Tunnels glittered with fractal frost that shifted in our headlamps, as if alive and watching. Sub-zero winds whispered like spectral voices, bearing hallucinations. Jenkins' leering face in the ice, Ramirez's pleas echoing eternally. The air thickened with a metallic tang that scorched my lungs. Had I inhaled the virus? Paranoia gnawed. I scrutinized my veins in the faint light, shadows playing cruel tricks. My wife's voice pleading again. "Don't let it take you." Then the horde surged, former comrades grotesquely fused with ice spines, eyes aglow with bioluminescent rot. They shambled from the gloom, a tide of frozen monstrosities. Marco fired, a flare exploding one in a hail of shards that stung like vengeful spirits. The blast illuminated dozens more slithering from fissures. We fought in desperation, flares erupting like hellfire, thawing walls that avalanched in icy fury. But betrayal came from below. A misfired bomb weakened a brace, and collapse entombed Marco. His screams, "No! Help me!" faded under tons of ice. His lullaby cutting off in a choked gasp, the ground quaking like a dying beast. Lena and I pressed deeper, breaths labored, bodies racked by cold and strain. Tunnels constricted, forcing crawls through vice-like passages where ice pressed like a lover's fatal embrace. Whispers intensified, not illusions now, but chittering burrows in the wall, building to a fever pitch like swarms of glacial insects, each scrape amplifying the dread. What if this was futile? What if the virus rode the winds beyond? Lena's resolve propelled us. She'd lost kin to warming floods, drawing her to this icy inferno to combat catastrophe. Now, she battled oblivion. We reached the core, a throbbing mass in a vast cavern, a heart of black ice veined with bioluminescent slime, radiating an eldritch glow. It pulsed with profane vitality, birthing horrors from wall-embedded pods, gelatinous sacs rupturing to spill writhing abominations. The air hummed, temperature rising unnaturally, drips echoing like a doomsday clock. Frostbiters swarmed, icy claws rending. One seized Lena, teeth piercing her shoulder. She screamed, blood freezing on her suit, but retaliated with fury. "Do it!" she roared, thrusting explosives to me, her flare gun blazing as she held the tide, light and shadow dancing in macabre frenzy. With trembling hands, I ignited the fuse, hissing like a serpent, and hurled it into the mass. It embedded, the core writhing in prescient agony. The blast was apocalyptic, ice shattering in thunderous roar, cavern collapsing in frozen cataclysm. Shockwaves flung me back. I clawed upward through crumbling tunnels, debris raining like judgment. Lena perished, her sacrifice granting seconds, her final flare echoing as the swarm claimed her. I erupted into the storm, the outpost groaning as fissures devoured it, modules crumpling into the abyss. Now, alone on the ice, I stagger through the fading blizzard, suit shredded, body numb as death's prelude. The horizon thaws under a pallid dawn, first light in weeks slicing the gloom. I've triggered my beacon, but rescue may never arrive. The storm scatters signals, the world vast and uncaring. The virus is buried, for us, crushed in collapse. Yet, as the planet warms, more ancient terrors may awaken, thawed by human folly. I've beheld hell, and it's not flame, it's ice, dissolving layer by insidious layer. If this log, etched on my tablet and interred in snow, is found, remember, some things must remain buried eternally. In the end, as cold claims me, I crumple into the drift, vision fading. But wait. Movement on the horizon. Rescue? No. Silhouettes rising from the ice, frostbiters that endured the cave-in, shambling with milky eyes and insatiable hunger. The core wasn't solitary. thawing stirs elsewhere. My last breath crystallizes in my lungs as they converge. The nightmare unbound. Hell has thawed, and nothing can contain it. As I bury the tablet deeper in the snowdrift, a low rumble pulses from the chasm, like a heartbeat defying extinction. Dawn strengthens, but so does the dread, a chill seeping into my marrow, unrelated to the wind. My reflection in an ice shard betrays me. Eyes flecked with milky white, veins threading blue beneath the skin. The virus clung in that final scramble, a silent stowaway ascending. Rescue choppers drone nearer, lured by my beacon, ignorant of the apocalypse they court. I've become the core, the thawing plague incarnate. And as they hoist me from the ice, the true outbreak ignites, not interred, but reborn. In that instant, as the world rushes to salvage its lone survivor, I smile through lips of frost. Hell isn't merely melting, it's evolving, and I am its harbinger. Some things should stay buried, but I have ensured they rise. The ice claimed them, but the curse lingers in the frost on my breath. This tape was stitched into a tattered cloth, needles pricking my fingers as I unwound it, souls trapped in seams, a ghost's vengeful weave. Don't let it ensnare you. The veil of the phantom seamstress. My name is Elliot, and I've always been a tailor by trade, stitching dreams into fabric for those who could afford them. In the bustling heart of the city, where the air thrummed with the clamor of street vendors and horse-drawn carriages, I eked out a modest living in a cramped workshop, mending hems and crafting suits for minor merchants. But the competition was fierce, and as the years wore on, my clients dwindled, leaving me with empty pockets and a gnawing void of failure. The city's grind had already begun unraveling my spirit, thread by thread, whispering of loves forsaken and ambitions frayed in its relentless maw. It was a life of quiet desperation, where the sharp prick of a needle was often the only sensation reminding me I still drew breath. So, when word came last autumn that my grandmother had passed, leaving me her secluded shop on the edge of town, the flicker of hope pierced the grief. The inheritance seemed a fresh start, a chance to flee the city's suffocating weave and revive my faltering craft. The shop was a relic from a bygone era, huddled at the end of a winding, fog-veiled lane where the town's cobblestone yielded to overgrown fields and whispering woods. It was a creaky, old building, its wooden facade scarred by decades of rain and neglect, with dust-flecked windows that filtered sunlight into hazy, spectral beams. Inside, the air hung heavy with the faint scent of aged thread, mingled with the musty decay of forgotten fabrics and the metallic tang of polished brass. Shelves sagged under bolts of silk, wool, and damask, some so ancient they disintegrated at the slightest touch. Cobwebs fastened the corners like ghostly lace, and the floorboards groaned underfoot as if resenting my presence. I remember the day I arrived. Autumn leaves swirled in a chill wind as I pushed open the door. the bell above tolling a mournful chime. Stitch, bind, weave. It seemed to echo faintly in my mind. It felt like stepping into a crypt, one that had lain in wait for me all these years. Its shadows already reaching for the regrets I carried like hidden seams. The crown jewel of the inheritance was my grandmother's antique sewing machine, a hulking brass monstrosity from the 19th century. Its intricate engravings of swirling vines and unblinking eyes seeming to track my every movement with predatory intent. The petals were worn smooth by generations of feet, dulled to a sinister sheen from endless hours of toil. Grandmother's will mentioned it vaguely, calling it a family heirloom with stories to tell. I dismissed it at first. To me, it was merely a tool, albeit a magnificent one, poised to elevate my work. I was grateful for the shop, the machine, the isolation. It all seemed a salve for my weary soul. Business had withered in the city, and this felt like a sanctuary for renewal. That very evening I arranged my tools, the flickering oil lamp casting elongated shadows that twisted like grasping fingers across the room as I prepared my first project. Yet, as I threaded the needle, a fleeting hallucination gripped me. The face of a lost love, Anna, blooming in the fabric's weave, her eyes accusatory, unraveling my old heartaches like loose stitches. The anomalies began small, insidious, slithering into my awareness like a loose thread unraveling a seam in the dark. On my first night alone, as the wind howled outside and rain lashed the windows, I threaded a needle for a simple vest promised to a local farmer. The air thickened, heavy with an unnatural chill that clawed into my bones like icy talons. As I worked, a whisper slithered from the machine's gears, like wind through shattered glass, murmuring words just beyond comprehension. It was faint, almost melodic, a susurrus blending with the rhythmic clack of the needle. I paused, hands hovering over the fabric, straining to listen. Stitch, bind, weave. I shook my head, forcing a nervous chuckle. It must be the wind whistling through the eaves, or fatigue from the long journey. The shop was ancient. Drafts and echoes were inevitable. But then the fabrics began to stir. A bolt of silk I'd laid out for a client's order twitched beneath my fingers, writhing like something alive. Faint veins pulsing under its surface, as if infused with a heartbeat. I froze, my pulse thundering in my ears. The lamp's flame leaping wildly, as if stirred by an unseen breath. The silk undulated, slow and sinuous, like a serpent uncoiling from slumber. I recoiled, my chair scraping the floor with a jarring screech, staring in disbelief. When I blinked and looked again, it lay still, innocuous, its surface smooth and unblemished. I rubbed my eyes, blaming the dim light and my frayed nerves. That night, as I sewed to the machine's insistent rhythm, the whispers sharpened.
Bind them.
Weave them in. They echoed in my mind, a chorus of spectral voices emanating from the brass itself. I told myself it was imagination, echoes of grandmother's old tales, winter night yarns of ghostly artisans who wove faints into cloth, ensnaring souls in eternal patterns. Yet, deep down, a malice stirred, as if some long-buried entity lurked within the machine, ravenous for more than mere thread. It coiled around my spine, cold and unyielding, like phantom fingers tracing the nape of my neck, murmuring of my own forsaken dreams. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay in the small bedroom above the shop, the ceiling beams creaking like the tortured groans of a sinking vessel. Dreams fragmented into nightmares, threads snaking around my limbs, dragging me into an abyss where the faces screamed silently from woven tapestries. Anna's among them, her voice a frayed whisper of abandonment. I woke drenched in sweat, the whispers fading like a venomous echo. The next morning I tried to dispel it, burying myself in mundane tasks of cleaning and organizing. But the shop felt alive, watchful, its dust motes swirling in the sunlight to form shapes like clutching hands. Or was that Lydia's face, fleeting and furious? The machine crouched in the corner, its brass gleaming with a predatory luster. I avoided it most of the day, opting for hand-stitching minor repairs. Yet, as evening descended, and shadows stretched like elongated claws, an inexplicable compulsion drew me back, urging me to test its mechanisms. The terrors escalated with my first customers, twisting the shop from sanctuary to sepulchre. Mrs. Harrow arrived on a misty afternoon, shrouded in black mourning garb, her eyes shadowed by unspoken anguish, a widow from the nearby village. Her face was etched with sorrow's deep furrows, losses too profound to utter. "A bespoke gown," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Something elegant for the autumn ball. I need to feel alive again." I nodded, with feigned sympathy, measuring her with trembling tape, noting the quiver in her hands before the mirror, mirroring my own buried grief for Anna, drowned in the sea of my obsessions. The air grew denser, the scent of aged thread thickening like cloying incense. I selected a fine damask, its crimson hue shimmering like congealing blood, and set to work on the machine. The pedals glided with an eerie autonomy, the needle blurring in a frenzy that made my hands ache in sympathy. Whispers rose from the gears, louder now, a sibilant chant weaving through the clatter. "Her sorrows, drown them deep, like your own sinking failures, Elliot." I tried to ignore it, fixating on the pattern, but a chill slithered over me, raising gooseflesh like prickling needles. The gown materialized far too swiftly, seems flawless beyond human skills. Mrs. Harrow tried it on in the fitting room, gasping in delight at first, twirling before the mirror as the fabric flowed like liquid night. "It's perfect," she murmured, her eyes igniting with fleeting life. Then her face contorted in abject horror. The gown clung like parasitic skin, constricting her torso with malicious intent. She choked, clawing at her throat as if submerged in icy depths, her gasps ragged and desperate. "Regrets pulling me under," she wheezed, eyes bulging with primal terror. She crumpled to the floor in convulsions, body thrashing as if assailed by invisible currents. I rushed to her, heart pounding like a trapped animal, and tore the dress free with frantic hands. The fabric resisted, clinging like thorny vines, threads snapping with the vicious pops. She lay gasping, skin pallid and slick, before scrambling upright and fleeing, babbling of endless waves of sorrow woven into her soul, drowning her in memories of a child lost to fever, a husband claimed by the sea. As she vanished, a subtle itch bloomed on my skin, like threads burrowing deep, etching my own regrets into my flesh. I examined the gown that evening, alone as thunder growled outside. Under the lamplight, it shimmered with faint, embroidered scenes that hadn't existed before. Intricate depictions of stormy waters, faces howling in eternal anguish, looping like a cursed frise. The threads throbbed faintly, alive with her pain's essence. I dropped it in revulsion, staggering back until the wall halted me. The machine loomed silent, yet its presence pressed like a malevolent shadow. Sleep was a torment that night. Whispers infiltrated my dreams, mocking with promises of more. More victims followed, each ensnaring me deeper in the machine's web of dread. Next came Mr. Thorne, a corpulent banker from the town square, cheeks flushed with avaricious arrogance. He demanded a suit of finest wool for his bloating frame, his voice oozing contempt for inferior tailors past. I measured him reluctantly, the shop's air turning oppressively warm, sweat beading on my brow despite the autumn bite. His greed echoing my own failed ambitions, scorching like molten coins in my thoughts. As I worked the machine, pedals spun with feverish zeal, the needle striking like a viper. Whispers filled the air.
Greed, tally the blood. Yours too, Elliot. Depths of the heart unpaid.
The suit assembled in hours, seems impeccable. But when Thorne donned it, his smirk dissolved into panic. He screamed, clawing at pockets swelling with phantom coins that seared his flesh like molten iron. "Ledgers of blood!" he howled, crumpling to his knees as visions assaulted him, endless scrolls stained crimson, tallying not gold, but lives shattered by usury and deceit. The fabric constricted, forcing him to relive every foreclosed home, every destitute family. I pried it off, but he staggered away a shattered husk, muttering of debts beyond redemption. The suit, upon inspection, bore embroidered ledgers in its lining, numbers shifted like sentient ink. The itch on my skin intensified, patterns faintly blooming, visions of my city's failures woven in. Then came the young widow, Eliza, her eyes hollowed by her husband's mining accident. She requested a simple shawl to fend off evening's chill, her voice quavering with buried grief. The machine hummed to life, whispers, a lullaby of rot.
Embrace rotting arms, like the loves you let decay, Elliot.
As she draped it over her shoulders, it ensnared her in visions of her husband's decaying grasp, threads tightening until she raked her skin bloody in frenzy. "He's here, holding me down," she cried, ripping it free and vanishing into the night. Each time, the machine's whispers swelled, reveling in the pandemonium.
Their fears are the finest silk, eternal garments for the damned.
In stolen moments of terror, I pieced it together. The machine wasn't merely sewing cloth, it was ensnaring souls, binding buried fears into perpetual nightmares. And I, grandmother's heir, was the unwitting vessel, condemned to bear witness. The shop, once a refuge, now felt like a cage, walls closing in with every echoing scream, my skin throbbing with the curse's insidious spread. The toll on me was profound. Nights bled into days as paranoia clutched my mind. I barricaded the door, shunning new customers, but the machine beckoned in the silence, gears clicking softly like impatient teeth. My reflections in the windows revealed a gaunt spectre, eyes ringed with shadows, and I noticed insidious changes, threads of doubt snaking through my thoughts, magnifying my failures. Anna's face haunting every bolt. Her loss, a putrid embrace I couldn't shake. The whispers turned intimate.
Your regrets, stitch them tight, forsaken for ambition's greed.
I shunned mirrors, dreading patterns blooming on my skin like stinging tattoos. Desperation propelled me to unearth the shop's secrets, delving into forgotten corners of my inheritance. One stormy evening, lightning slashing the attic in jagged bursts, I ascended the narrow stairs, air choked with dust and mildew's rot. Amid yellow ledgers and crumbling sketches, faded designs of gowns and suits from lost eras, I discovered a journal, bound in cracked leather, pages brittle as desiccated skin. It was my great-aunt Lydia's, a rival tailor spurned by my grandmother decades ago. The entries sketched betrayal. Lydia, the true visionary, her innovations coveted, but grandmother, consumed by envy, stole them, claiming glory and dooming Lydia to ruin. The journal chronicled the fall, clients vanishing, debts mounting, reputation unraveling like cheap thread. As I read, phantom pain lanced my chest, Lydia's betrayal echoing my own heart's wounds, her malice seeping into me like venom through the pages. In her final entry, scrawled in quivering script smeared with what might have been tears or venom, she cursed the machine with her dying breath, succumbing to a self-administered poison. Let every stitch bind the betrayer's bloodline to my agony. Weave their souls into the void. The words iced my veins. The spectre was her, fixated on me, the last descendant, her malice a festering rot unhealed by time. That night, compelled to sew, the machine infused my work with omens, threads forming visions of my failures, lost loves as ghostly silhouettes in the fabric, forsaken ambitions fraying like severed veins, drawing me toward reckoning. Shadows congealed into a wraith-like form, hollow eyes glaring from brass reflections, urging confrontation. She manifested in glimpses, a translucent woman in ragged attire, fingers elongated like needles, reaching to drag me into the machine's gaping maw, her whispers taunting.
Join me, Elliot, in the weaves of your regrets.
I could not endure it. The curse's weight smothered me like a burial shroud, extinguishing hope. In a fevered midnight ritual drawn from occult scribbles in the journal's margins, rites of fire and reversal from shadowed grimoires, I commandeered the machine one last time. The shop became a cocoon of darkness, candles guttering in a circle around the brass abomination, flames birthing writhing shadows on the walls. The air reeked of melting wax and smouldering herbs scattered per the incantations. Rain scourged the windows, thunder rumbling like the machine's pulsing heart. I recreated the betrayal's pivotal garment, a dress Lydia designed, the one grandmother usurped. Hands shaking, I cut the pattern from memory, pristine white silk resisting my scissors like living flesh. Petals whirled in madness, needle a storm of fury, whispers escalating to shrieks.
Unravel me if you dare.
The dress formed, embroidered with the theft, shadowy thieves pilfering sketches under moonlit gloom. Lydia's face twisted in eternal torment. As the final stitch sealed it, a gale snuffed half the candles, drowning the room in twilight. I drenched the garment in oil, the liquid seeping in like spilled blood, and bore it to the hearth's ravenous blaze. I cast it into the flames. The fabric shrieked as it burned, a piercing, inhuman wail that reverberated through the shop, shattering windows and spewing embers like vengeful spirits. The spectre materialized fully, distorted, rage incarnate, featuring a grotesque mask of betrayal, ectoplasmic threads unraveling from her form like bleeding wounds. She lunged, fingers grazing my skin with glacial fire. But as the dress crumbled to ash, she disintegrated in a final, soul-rending howl, essence dispersing like acrid smoke. The machine ground to a shuddering halt. Exhausted, I collapsed, racked with sobs of deliverance, convinced I'd banished the curse. The shop felt hollow. The oppressive pall lifted. For the first time in weeks, I breathed unburdened. But as dawn bled across the sky in pallid gold, a subtle itch wormed into my veins, like threads burrowing deep beneath my flesh. I stumbled to the mirror, morning light unveiling the abomination, Faint patterns bloomed on my skin, embroidered visions of every customer's torment. Mrs. Harrow's drowning sorrows, Thorn's scorching greed, Eliza's putrid embrace, and now my own, indelibly woven into my being. The ghost hadn't fled, she'd bound herself to me, her ultimate vengeance etching the tapestry of agony into my soul. No flame could erase it. I am the eternal garment now, haunted by whispers only I can hear, my body a living malediction that pulses with every heartbeat. As the town stirs outside, blind to the nightmare I've become, I know there is no escape, only an infinite weave of torment, tethering me in her vendetta until my life's threads finally fray. In the days that followed, I tried to conceal the markings, swathing my skin in layers of fabric from my own stock, but the threads within throbbed with insidious vitality, emboldening with each hour. Customers came and went, their gazes lingering with unspoken unease, and I sensed the curse awakening, ravenous to ensnare fresh souls in its design. One evening, alone in the dim shop, the sewing machine stirred unbidden, its needle capering across a virgin bolt of cloth, stitching patterns that mirrored the horrors inscribed on my flesh. I watched in numb horror, grasping the truth. I was no longer mere bearer, but the loom itself, fated to fashion endless vestments of suffering for an unwitting world. Desperation drove me to the hearth once more, but this time I offered myself to the flames, praying to incinerate the infestation. The fire devoured me with voracious tongues, agony erupting like 1,000 needles impaling my core. But as vision dimmed, her laughter resounded in the inferno, not vanquished, but victorious. In that terminal instant, I comprehended the final perversion. My ashes would scatter on the wind, sowing the curse into the town's soil, where it would germinate in every heart, every hearth. The tailor's legacy was sealed, an immortal pall enshrouding all. And in death I would become the thread that bound them eternally. Stitched into the torment, the threads pull at reality itself. The final tape pulsed with an unnatural glow, equations scrawled on its case like incantations. It spoke of voids beyond time, unraveling all we know. As it plays, I think I can feel history shifting. Dare to face the quantum quagmire, the end of everything. I never believed in fate until it unraveled me from the inside out. My name is Dr. Gordon Thorne, and for over a decade I was the driving force behind the Erebus Quantum Research Facility, a monolithic fortress of steel and concrete buried deep in the unforgiving Alaskan wilderness. Hidden beneath miles of snow-swept tundra, it stood isolated by design, where the aurora borealis danced like ethereal ghosts across the night sky. Our work demanded secrecy, and the remote location ensured any mistakes would be contained. Or so we thought. Our pursuit was revolutionary, entangling subatomic particles with the primordial void, a theoretical abyss predating the Big Bang, a boundless soup of pure potentiality, where time, space, and matter dissolved into nothingness. It was the ultimate frontier, promising to rewrite physics, unlock infinite energy, and bend even reality itself. Obsession had long consumed me. I'd sacrificed 2 marriages to this dream, watching my wives fade into the shadows of late-night equations and endless simulations. Friendships withered under my single-minded focus. Colleagues who once shared drinks and debates now averted their eyes, murmuring of my mad genius. But I didn't care. The void whispered to me in dreams, a chilling emptiness that promised answers to questions humanity dared not ask, its voice like a cold wind slithering through cracked bones. My team was small, but elite. Lena Vasquez, my brilliant second-in-command, a quantum physicist with a razor-sharp mind and a hidden fragility. She'd buried her grief over a family lost in a car accident beneath layers of unyielding work. Marcus Hale, our engineer, was a burly pragmatist who cracked jokes to mask insecurities rooted in a childhood of poverty and loss. Then there were the others. Vikram Singh, our eager young data analyst, Sarah Klein, the prodigy intern fresh from MIT, and a handful of technicians whose names blurred in our shared mania. They followed me blindly, seduced by promises of glory, etching their names into science's annals. We were a fractured family, bound by hubris and the intoxicating thrill of the unknown. The night of the experiment descended like a gathering storm. The lab hummed with sterile precision, the air thick with ozone and heated metal. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting jagged shadows across monitors and control panels. Beneath us, the collider, a colossal ring of superconducting magnets, thrummed with latent power. We'd spent months calibrating it, syncing qubits to faint echoes of the void, subtle ripples in space-time, like whispers from the edge of oblivion. "Systems nominal," Marcus reported, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. Lena stood beside me, dark hair tied back, eyes locked on the central display. "Entanglement sequence ready, Gordon. This is it." I nodded, my heart pounding with exhilaration laced with dread. "Initiate." Lena's voice sliced the tension. "Entanglement initiated." The collider roared to life, a low thrum swelling like the heartbeat of some ancient, awakening beast. Energy surged, particles hurtling towards light speed, bridging the gap to the void. For a breathless moment, silence reigned, profound, expectant. Success. Then, reality fractured. It began subtly, a ripple in the air, like heat haze distorting sun-scorched asphalt. Lights flickered, and an unnatural chill seeped in, bone-deep and insidious, as if the void itself exhaled frost into our veins. Shadowy figures materialized at vision's edge. Humanoid at first. Elegant silhouettes gliding through corridors with otherworldly grace, tall and slender. Their forms shifted like smoke, whispering in tongues that clawed at buried memories, half-remembered childhood nightmares, or something deeper, ancestral echoes of terror. The words weren't heard. They resonated in the mind, stirring a profound loss and infinite, aching longing that made the soul ache with rot. But grace decayed into nightmare. The figures twisted before our eyes, limbs elongating into jagged claws, bodies fracturing into swarms of ravenous abominations. What started as spectral elegance became grotesque parodies of life, skin splitting to reveal chitinous exoskeletons, eyes multiplying like festering sores, weeping pus that hissed on the floor. They clawed at existence's edges, movements jerky and predatory, tearing through an invisible veil with wet, ripping sounds. And with them came the inverse time loop. Time didn't rewind, it inverted, folding backward in a nightmarish spiral, eroding the present toward an abyssal origin. Clocks spun counterclockwise erratically, hours compressing into seconds, days stretching into inverted eons where cause birthed effect in maddening, inescapable loops that echoed with the screams of futures undone. Panic erupted like a bursting vein. Alarms blared, warping into guttural howls that reverberated through the facility like the cries of dying gods. Servers glitched, screens flickering from digital interfaces to analog dials, then devolving into crude abacuses of bone and stone, as if technology's very essence unraveled like frayed sinew. Our memories splintered in sync, flashes of personal histories pulling apart like threads from a rotting tapestry. I saw Lena convulsing, screaming as she relived the fall of Rome, her mind trapped in a legionnaire's body, hacking at shadows with a gladius, the metallic tang of blood choking her throat. Marcus muttered of prehistoric hunts, eyes wild, quantum equations erased by spear-throwing instincts honed in a world of fang and claw, where survival's raw stink clung to the skin. The entities fed on the chaos, black, writhing masses with too many eyes glowing like embers in an endless night. They devoured the fracturing timeline, dismantling history layer by layer. Tech regressed, holograms crumbling to papyrus scrolls. Then flint tools etched with primitive symbols, finally dissolving into raw elements, stone and earth, cold and unyielding. The facility transformed, cell walls pulsed with organic veins, corridors twisting into labyrinthine caves dripping with bioluminescent slime that whispered obscenities. The air thickened, humid and fetid, reeking of decay and primal musk, as if the void birthed a regressive reality from its festering womb. Paranoia spread like a plague through our dwindling group. "They're inside us," Marcus hissed one night. Time had dissolved, days bleeding into inverted eons where sunrises felt like extinctions. We huddled in the control room's remnants, now a throbbing cave with walls of living flesh, veins of shadow pulsing beneath like hidden hearts. The swarms intensified, devolving into primal horrors, all teeth and insatiable hunger. Amorphous blobs splitting and reforming, devouring light with slobbering maws. They didn't just attack. they unearthed our savage cores. A gnawing urge in my bones to tear into raw flesh, to howl at unseen moons, to shed reason for the blood-soaked thrill of the hunt. The void stripped civilization's veneer, exposing the beast beneath, its breath hot and rank on our necks. Poor Vikram succumbed first, on a scavenging run through warped corridors where vending machines had regressed to piles of roots and gnawed bones. His eyes went vacant. He babbled of hunts before man's dawn, voice a guttural chant. Then the swarm descended, a writhing cloud of claws rending his flesh, dissolving him into their mass with wet, slurping sounds that lingered like echoes in a grave. His screams inverted, starting as a death rattle, building backward to a birth cry, looping in eternal agony. The horror shattered us. Our group dwindled to 6, trapped in the escalating spiral. Scavenging became our desperate right, a futile grasp at survival in the ever-shifting maze. We pored over corrupted logs, once holograms, now stone tablets, with runes that shifted like living ink, bleeding across the surface in oily tendrils. Hallucinations assaulted us, obliterated epochs where empires crumbled to barbarism, skyscrapers regressing to ziggurats, then mud huts, dinosaurs prowling where cities once stood, their roars inverting into echoes of future extinctions that chilled the marrow. The void infiltrated our dreams, if such fractured sleep could be called that. Visions of humanity's descent from enlightened souls to crouching primates, then slime-crawling horrors in primordial seas, their wet slither, a prelude to our own dissolution. We must sever the entanglement. I rasped one cycle, voice hoarse from screaming at phantoms. The plan coalesced amid the madness. Overload the collider's core, surge feedback to rupture the void's hold. But the entities whispered through walls like rustling leaves in a gale.
You birthed us from hubris. Join the void.
They spilled secrets of devoured civilizations, their essences woven into the swarms like threads of forgotten screams. Betrayals cracked our fragile bonds. In the former mess hall, now a fetid cavern strewn with glowing fungi, Lena accused Marcus of sabotage, eyes wild, faint gladius scars from inverted memories etched on her arms like brands.
The whispers say he's one of them.
Fights erupted in the labyrinthine chaos, corridors twisting into mazes of vines and bone, shadows lunging like living snares, minds fractured. I glimpsed my hands as claws in the dim light, felt the pull to devour, to dominate. Sarah, our youngest, yielded during a scouting mission, turning with a feral grin, teeth bared like predators, before melting into the swarm amid ecstatic howls that curdled the blood. The horrors thickened, amorphous blobs of shadow and fang devouring sanity's remnants. Down to 3. Me, Lena, Marcus. We were hunted by our comrades' ghosts. Paranoia climaxed in a brutal skirmish. Marcus, maddened by visions of his youth regressing to ancient famines, lunged at Lena with a bone shard. I intervened, the brawl leaving us bloodied, but it forged tenuous resolve. We pressed toward the core, hulls inverting mid-step, floors flipping to ceilings in gut-wrenching disorientation. In the harrowing climax, as the loop tightened like a noose of thorns, I knew the cost. The core chamber was a maelstrom of inverted time, artifacts swirling like debris in a tornado, Roman coins melting to dinosaur fossils, medieval swords regressing to stone axes, orbiting a yawning black vortex pulsing with unholy light that burned the eyes. The swarms converged, a tidal wave of teeth and eyes, screeching, inverting to primordial roars that vibrated in the chest like impending doom. "Gordon, no!" Lena cried, clutching my arm, but I shoved her back, Marcus holding her. The sacrifice was clear. Entangle myself with the void, channel the surge through my body. As claws grazed my skin, I activated it. Pain erupted, time inverting through my very veins, reliving not my life, but humanity's descent into primal sludge. The void's embrace was cold infinity, pulling me backward, divorces unraveling to courtships, childhood dissolving to ancestral hunts, then further to ape-like grunts in shadowed forests, wriggling forms in oozing seas. The surge built a cataclysmic loop tearing reality's seams. It worked, fleetingly. A rupture exploded, repelling swarms in inverted light's blinding flash. Their forms disintegrated, screeching into oblivion as the loop shattered, reality snapping back, or its mangled echo. The facility groaned, stabilizing into a ruined husk, the air purging its primal reek. We emerged into a fractured world. Skies bruised violet and crimson, forests whispering ancient urges through pines like predatory breaths. Lena and Marcus survived, staggering beside me, bodies scarred and warped light. But the void's taint lingered, an insidious undercurrent in our veins, urges to hunt, dominate, regress into the glimpsed beasts. I feel it now, clawing my mind, cycle teetering on renewal. Staring at the aurora's mocking faces, I wonder, breakthrough or eternal fall. Yet, wonder faded to certainty. Under that bruised sky, Lena and Marcus yielded first, eyes glazing with feral hunger, turning on each other in a savage frenzy of blood and silence. I resisted, fleeing into the wilderness, but the void's whisper swelled, pulling inexorably. In clarity's final gasp, truth dawned. The entanglement endured, inverting us into vessels for rebirth. With a defiant howl, I surrendered, my form dissolving into the rising swarm, ensuring the cycle's eternal churn, not as conquerors, but willing harbingers of the abyss.
And so, the last tape unwinds, reality fraying at the edges. These 7 recordings, mirrors, codices, eaters, collectors, thaws, veils, quagmires.
They're connected, you see. A single curse, born from humanity's hubris, unleashing terrors from the beyond. I thought I could contain them, archive them away. But now, the vault is empty. The tapes are gone. Wait. They're with you now. In your ears. In your mind. The curse has spread. If you hear scratching at your door, whispers in the static, it's too late. You've become the next recording. Sleep well, listener. Or don't sleep at all.